Hello there everybody, WhatCulture's Adam Clery here, and yes, I have played it. But before I start, I just need to set the scene for you, right? It is the school summer holidays in the UK. It is sometime in 1998, and myself and a few friends venture over to Andrew Stevenson's house because he was one of the only people at school who had a Sony PlayStation. Now, I got my ass handed to me on Ridge Racer. I didn't really get Parappa the Rapper, but later in the evening, everybody I'm with decides to go for Blockbuster Video and have a little ride round the streets on their bikes, and I can't go because I didn't bring my bike. So I sit there at his house with just the PlayStation, and on the way out he says, if you have a rummage through those discs, there's a weird, Japanese storytelling game in there. I didn't like it, but it'll kill a few hours for you. So I rummage through those discs and I pull out Final Fantasy VII, and from that moment on, my life changed forever. I then begged my mother for a Sony PlayStation. I got one for Christmas along with all 3 discs of Final Fantasy VII, and that was it. I never looked back, and now 20 years later almost, and probably that many playthroughs as well, it remains the game that not only made me fall in love with Final Fantasy as a franchise, but probably made me fall in love with gaming full stop. So you understand if I tell you that I was nervous about this remake, because so often or not, these rehashes, these reimaginings, they're little more than a ill-advised cash grab that kind of ruins the joy of the original in the first place, and I really did not want that to happen with a game that I owe so very much to. So the other week down in London, Square Enix very kindly allowed us to play a couple of hours of the game, and with my idiot 11-year-old heart beating clean through my chest, I finally got reacquainted with an old friend to tell the greatest story ever told yet again. So, my name is Adam Clery, and these are all the ups and downs from the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Let's mosey. Now, you only ever get one chance to make a first impression, and given the level of emotion that is riding on the success of this game, this is probably one of the most critical first impressions in video game history, and I am very, very relieved to report that the Final Fantasy VII Remake absolutely stuns you with how beautiful it is from the very first few seconds, and in the entire 4 hours I've played it, it never once let me go. Visually, the whole thing is an absolute triumph. It feels, even by today's standards, like a big step forward in a number of regards, and I would imagine this will be considered where this generation of consoles peaks. Everything about it on a first impressions level is just amazing. The way they've made Midgar, the characterization, the way they've brought some of these famous faces to life, it all deserves so much credit. The attention to detail here is stupendous. The first impressions of this game alone get the first up. And this is something that might be a little bit hard to describe, but the scale of this game feels absolutely huge. Like, if you remember playing the initial one, Midgar felt like this giant living city, unlike anything you'd ever seen in a video game before. And then when you got onto the world map and you realized there was this whole other world to explore, it felt almost infinite. Now, we know, of course, the world map wasn't that big and there was only certain sections of Midgar you could play, but it gave you that feeling of this enormous world, which, as I say, felt nothing like anything you'd ever played before. Now, recreating that kind of feel in a game when we know how big game worlds can be is a massive challenge, but yet it still feels huge. Like, as I say, I've only played a few hours with this game. I have by no means explored the size and the breadth and the scale of it, but losing yourself in an RPG is about giving yourself completely to that world, and you need it to feel like you could go anywhere and do anything. And in the short time I had, I did feel like that, which I wasn't expecting to, given kind of where the bar is with RPGs these days. So just the fact that they pulled that off is in itself an up. But of course, for all that RPGs are about the world they create, they're far more about the characters that inhabit that world. And taking the characters from the original Final Fantasy VII and somehow making them believable as a fully realized, lifelike 4D amazing gaming model is probably the biggest challenge that was facing the developers. Now, yes, alright, if you've seen Advent Children, you do kind of know what most of these characters are going to look like, but the majority of people playing this game probably won't have seen that movie, and they will be absolutely stunned by how brilliantly brought to life all these characters are. Like, Cloud is absolutely perfect, the way they've pitched him. Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie have more character development in the opening 5 minutes of this game than they did in the entire previous one. Not going to give away too many spoilers here, but even though I didn't play up to that particular point in the story, knowing what's probably going to happen to them is going to be considerably harder to take. Some bits might end up dividing opinion, like the villains we see, like President Shinra, they are straight out of like a 90s Hollywood blockbuster villain manual, so they're a little bit cliched, and Barrett does just slightly veer into slightly problematic characterization territory, but given that they present him as this giant, over-the-top macho man Randy Savage character, he does kind of get away with it. Now, sadly, in my playthrough, I didn't get to see Red 13 or Kate Sith or Yuffie or Vincent or even my personal MVPs, the Turks, but the early signs for how they've done the characters are really, really, really good. So that gets an up with one big caveat. I'm not going to spend ages talking about this, but Tifa is a slight problem. Like way back in June of last year, they released some early footage of the game in which they showed how stunning the character models were and how great the game was going to look. And after everybody stopped going, wow, that's amazing, a load of weirdos started complaining about Tifa's boobs. Now, putting aside the fact that the original looked like this, which is absolutely ridiculous, and the fact that Advent Children actually came up with a perfectly modern characterization of Tifa, putting all that to one side, there was still apparently a subset of people who can't possibly even dream of buying a video game unless they're able to tug themselves off in the pause menu. Now, you would have thought that the company would have just heard these complaints and comically brushed them off, but remember, this is the same company that upgraded Lightning's boobs in Final Fantasy XIII because people said they weren't big enough. So they have, it looks like, remodeled Tifa. And as a result, they have now, yes, enlarged her breasts, of course, and given her these giant bug eyes, absolutely zero waist, slender limbs, but still curvy hips, and made her look like a plastic sex doll. That's a down. Now, I know some people will be like, well, that's just what Tifa looks like, Adam. If they're remaking the game, they've got to stay true to the original, but no, they don't, and they've even proved that with the way they're handling the story in this. Now, I'm going to be upfront here. They have changed the story of Final Fantasy VII. I'm just gotta get that out there. We've all got to kind of get over it. But what they've done is not like torn it up massively. They're still going through story beat A, story beat B, story beat C, but how they get to those different beats, and indeed why they do it in the first place, that's all been fair game for a reimagining. Just to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about here, yes, Avalanche do still get into the reactors with a bomb, but they're trying to disable them, and it's actually Shinra who blow them up to try and create a bit of a conspiracy, to try and erode their popular support. Now, but before you get carried away with this, I would have thought I would have been upset by this. I'm very precious over the story, but when you actually go back and you look at it and you break it down, there's loads of narrative threads that get brought up and dropped, and a load of stuff that doesn't quite make sense unless you read a 2,000-word explainer on it. So for them to be brave enough to go into the story, the thing people did not want them to mess with, and go, right, how do we just make this a little bit better and still make sense, is worthy of acclaim. I'm really happy they've done that. It genuinely works from what I was playing through it. I'm giving the new story an up. Or I should say I'm giving most of it an up. There is one thing they've changed which I think is a bad misstep, which kind of needs brought up. Like, if you played the original, where did you first see Sephiroth? It was in Calm, after you've got out of Midgar, when they're recapping the story, when you finally realise who the real baddie is. That's one of the best things in the first disc of the game. Not now, though. He appears after the first reactor gets blown up. He's part of Cloud's story the whole way through, which, while yes, I do understand why you do that, it probably does make the story make a little bit of sense. It removes one of the best reveals in the original Final Fantasy, because you think you're fighting Shinra, you think you're fighting this mega evil globe-spanning corporation, and somewhere down the line, you're gonna have to knock off that otherwise untouchable president until you escape the Shinra building and you find him impaled over his own desk, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, they're not the real baddies. Oh dear. And it's that really sells you on the scale of the game and how you're gonna have to go traveling the world after this one guy. But now, like, if you've played the game before, you already know the stuff, but if you're new to it, he's just there from the start, which is kind of going to diminish part of the first act. It's kind of lose some of the appeal of the second and third, and I just think, yeah, fair enough, rewrite it, but don't take that reveal away. That first bit, where you truly get the grips with Sephiroth, where he looks up at you from the fire, and you finally realise what you're dealing with. You've lost that now, that's a down. All right, a couple of really quick broad strokes here because it doesn't really fit into a natural flow like I like to have with these videos, but I need to talk about it anyway. First of all, one of the best things they've done about this is the score of the game. Now, that might seem like a small thing to pick up upon, but they've actually completely reimagined the way music works in the game. Like, you go into a reactor now, yes, it's the same original score you used to hear in the reactor, but instead of it cutting to the battle music, It just changes the reactor music when you're in a battle. It's kind of hard to describe. Basically, they've recorded multiple alternate versions of the same score depending on what you're doing in that particular location, and it goes seamlessly between all of them as and when required. Like, don't get me wrong, the boss music is still there, the battle music is still there, but it's used more sparingly, it's reserved for special occasions. The music is, honestly, you'll see what I mean when you play it, or you'll hear what I mean when you play it. It's brilliant. So no. And speaking of combat, that is absolutely amazing as well. Basically, Square sat down, they thought, well, we've got this modern slash and throw powers around Final Fantasy fighting system, but also everybody really liked the ATB gauge filling up and doing it more turn-based, so how do we mix this up? And what they've done is they've taken that and made it basically fit with that, and then taken that and made it fit with that. You can jump around and you can slash away while your ATB gauge fills up to use special powers, or you can put it in classic mode and just sit there, watch the fight unfold in front of you, and select what you want to do from menus. They've given you options over how to fight, the new way or the old way. Or more specifically, the new way with a little tinge of the old way, or the old way that feels a little bit like the new way. That is the biggest up of the whole game for me. The combat's amazing. And you know what it is? The combat needs to be that good because the game is honestly hard. Like, it's gonna catch a lot of players off guard, this. Like, Final Fantasy VII was not a difficult game. That first boss, you used to attack him, then it says, oh, don't attack him while he's got his tail up. So you don't attack him when he's got his tail up, then you attack him again, and you win. That boss, God Scorpion in the new one, is nails. Now, look, don't get me wrong, it's not Sekiro, it's certainly not Dark Souls, but those two games were mentioned by otherwise seasoned gaming journalists as this very boss fight handed them a surprising game over screen. Like, gaming tastes they've changed in the last 20 years. People want to test, they want to really be tested as they're seeing the story unfold, and categorically, Final Fantasy VII will now test you. But one element of this game that doesn't quite meet modern gaming standards is the dialogue. Like, after Red Dead, after Horizon, after The Last of Us, people expect an accomplished level of script writing and of voice performance, and this game, from what I've played, doesn't really feel on that level. Like, this is a small gripe, and it's maybe just me. And to be fair, they probably can't win here because we've all heard this script 100 times in our head. And in our heads, it's always been perfect, so how are they ever going to live up to that? But just, some of it feels a little bit cliched and just a little bit too much, and it's just, I don't know. Some people might not like this. I didn't. It's not going to ruin my enjoyment by any stretch of the imagination, but if you were coming into this wanting some brilliant dialogue with some really tight writing, that ain't there. It's just video game speak. Down. And this brings me to my final point, and you know what? Maybe this shouldn't be enough. Maybe this is not objective video game journalism. Maybe this is literally just me. But my overriding emotion when I left that play session was not of joy, it was not of excitement, it was not anticipation, it wasn't any of that. It was just relief. Pure, unrestrained weight off my shoulders. My God, where is my pint? I can't believe the crazy bastards actually did it. Relief. I was worried about this game. I did not want it to be bad. I was pinning so much hope on it being good and living up to the standards of the original, and they've nailed it. They've absolutely done it. They have remade Final Fantasy VII, and it is as good as Final Fantasy VII. Up. So, there you go. Those are all the ups and downs from the Final Fantasy VII Remake that I absolutely cannot believe I have now played. Thanks so much to Square Enix for having us down on the day, but this, don't worry, it's not a sponsored post or anything like that. These are my honest, true, verified feelings, and who knows, maybe some of them will change when the full game finally releases next month. But either way, let us know what you made of it all in the comments below. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I have, of course, been Adam Clery, and I will see you soon. Bye.